The Battle of Ramadi, also called the Fall of Ramadi, in 2014 and 2015 was a part of an ISIL offensive to capture all of the Anbar province. Ramadi was one of the Iraqi government's last strongholds in Anbar, after its success in a previous campaign. The battle began in October 2014 and drew to a close as Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant insurgents seized hold of government buildings on 14 May 2015. On the 17th of May, it was reported that the Iraqi army and special forces fled the city, with 500 civilians and security personnel dead. Background: Ramadi is the capital of the Anbar province and is one of the biggest cities in Iraq. It was partially conquered by ISIL and its allies when fighting erupted in the Anbar province. Following a counterattack by government forces, the Iraqi government recaptured most of the city by February 2014, and all of it by March 2014. The claim was repeated again in May, in which the Anbar police chief said that most of the city was under their control. However, ISIL returned, and reportedly had a presence in Ramadi by October 2014. On October 16, Wilayah Anbar, ISIL's name for its faction in the Anbar province, published a series of photos showing its presence in Ramadi. It was stated by Long War Journal that ISIL was in control of 60% of Ramadi, and that much of its southern districts and areas west and north of the city are contested or held by ISIL. Battle: ISIL's attack and Iraqi government counterattack. The attack on Ramadi began after ISIL attacked the city from the east and from the west. They captured the village of Al-Shujaria, and fired at government buildings in the central part of the city. ISIL militants also pounded the city center with mortars, and used car bombs to try to weaken government forces in the area. Security forces and tribal fighters launched a counterattack, and stopped ISIL from advancing from ISIL-held parts of the city. 20 soldiers died as a result, and government forces called for reinforcements, and clashes continued in the city. The next day, Iraqi government fighters launched an operation to retake lost ground. The operation focused on recapturing the Sijaria neighborhood seized on Friday. One government official said that heavy fighting was continuing in the city, with both sides firing mortars at each other. Also, during an Iraqi government counter-offensive, they discovered 25 dead men on the eastern edge of Ramadi from the Al-Bufar tribe, killed by ISIL. A tribal leader, Sheikh Rafi al-Fardawi, said that there were possibly more than 25. Heavy fighting continued on November 23. Fierce battles took place between government forces and ISIL near the main government complex, which hosts the regional government and security headquarters. The battles were taking place about 1,000 feet away from the government complex. About 37 people were reported dead in the fighting, according to local authorities. On November 24, ISIL was reportedly 150 meters away from the city center, and government forces were reinforced with weapons from 5 planes that arrived in government-held areas of Ramadi. The heaviest fighting so far was occurring in downtown Ramadi, where the government complex was still held by Iraqi forces. ISIL seized the houses of Dulami tribe leaders, and used them as attack bases. One government official said ISIL had a presence in the center of Ramadi from the eastern side and have taken control of the Al-Mu'aliman district and the Haouz area in the center, despite reported setbacks. Iraqi forces said the momentum was shifting in the favor of government forces. Iraqi forces, with the help of the coalition airstrikes, managed to push back ISIL fighters in the city and take back a key military supply line. However, clashes continued in the eastern suburbs. On November 25, ISIL published a series of photos through Twitter that showed the fighting in Ramadi. Some showed that ISIL captured M113 armored personnel carriers, and used them to attack Iraqi forces and tribal fighters. On November 26, Iraqi forces said they repelled an ISIL offensive on the government complex, and also that the militants suffered heavy losses. Iraqi forces, supported by tribal fighters and airstrikes, repelled other attacks as well. Setbacks were also reported for government forces, because during the night before, ISIL seized the education directorate and were less than 20 meters away from the complex. The Anbar Provincial Council issued a statement saying that the city could fall to ISIL within the next 24 hours. Col. Hamid Shanduk said that government forces were defending the compound, and the governor of the Anbar province said that, if we lose Anbar, that means we will lose Iraq. I will very soon be with the tribes and the security forces in Anbar to fight. Continued ISIL assaults on Ramadi. Heavy fighting continued on November 29, mainly in the Al-Huz, Muliman, and Bakr districts. A police major said that clashes had been going on for hours, and tribal leaders said they retook entrances that led to the Al-Huz district. They also said that if military airstrikes continued, then they may be able to take complete control of Ramadi. On December 2, Iraqi security forces continued to repel attacks by ISIL forces on Ramadi. The attacks began when ISIL fighters tried to storm the city from 3 fronts, but tribal fighters in the northwestern Abu Risha fought back and repelled the assault. The clashes killed 10 ISIL militants and 2 Iraqi soldiers. Iraqi forces had prevented ISIL from reaching the government complex, as a result of airstrikes and increased security. However, Iraqi officials said that coalition airstrikes around the city had stopped. Despite that, the U.S. said they hit an ISIL column near Ramadi, destroying a vehicle and a tactical unit. On December 6, Iraqi forces foiled multiple ISIL attempts to capture the government complex. On December 8, the Iraqi army claimed they made major advances in the Anbar province, and claimed that they killed 300 ISIL fighters in Ramadi. Advances were reportedly made in the Huz and Sajariya districts. This was confirmed by the police chief of the Anbar province, saying that coalition airstrikes destroyed many vehicles captured by ISIL. On December 9, the Al-Bunaimar tribe said it could only fight ISIL for 5 more days, because they were running low on ammunition and weapons. A tribal leader said that the Iraqi government should be supplying the tribesmen, and not the U.S. Sporadic fighting continued, and an Iraqi lawmaker warned that ISIL was assembling a large amount of fighters for an all-out attack on Ramadi. After a major assault on the government complex the day before, he said that clashes were still continuing, despite the fact the attack was repelled. On December 10, the humanitarian situation in the Anbar province was described as critical. ISIL launched another unsuccessful assault on the government complex, and 15 ISIL fighters were killed. This led to fears that Ramadi would fall to ISIL soon, due to the lack of ammunition and support. An Australian national fighting for ISIL was reportedly killed as a result of the fighting in Ramadi's southern districts. ISIL offensive. On December 11, fierce clashes took place around Ramadi. In rural areas, a booby-trapped vehicle was detonated close to the 6th Brigade base. Many security forces were killed by the blast, and an ISIL assault followed. Brigadier Hassan Ahmed was killed in a battle with ISIL forces, and the group were on 2 sides of the base. Elsewhere in Ramadi, ISIL tried to advance into the Hawz district, but security forces engaged them in an attempt to halt their advance. They partially repelled the attack, but ISIL captured some parts of the district. The following day, an Iraqi government attempt to recapture the town of Hit, a major town near Ramadi, failed. ISIL responded with a major counterattack in which ISIL made gains in areas west of Ramadi. On December 12, a patrol of RAF Tornado GR-4s provided aerial support to Iraqi soldiers engaged in a firefight with ISIL militants near Ramadi, destroying several ISIL firing positions and 3 ISIL vehicles, including 2 armored personnel carriers. The same day, ISIL captured 15 villages in the Anbar province, according to Sheikh Neem al-Kuaud, one of Anbar's tribal leaders, who said ISIL recaptured these villages, after they were previously liberated by the Western Province's tribesmen. 35 members of Al-Bunaym tribe were captured by ISIL after battles against the radical militant group in Al-Mahbubiyah near Hit. On December 13, ISIL fighters stormed the town, killing at least 19 policemen and trapping others inside their headquarters. ISIL then proceeded to capture the town of Al-Wafa, after starting its assault early on Friday. Iraqi forces tried to defend it, but the lack of ammunition forced him to retreat and give up control of the town. Police forces, backed by few members of government-paid Sunni tribal fighters, tried to prevent the militants from crossing the sand barrier surrounding the town, but were overwhelmed when sleeper cells from inside opened fire on them, according to officials. With the town's fall, ISIL controlled 3 major towns to the west of Ramadi, including Hit and Kibasa. Police forces and the pro-government Sunni fighters were forced to retreat to a nearby police brigade headquarters bordering their town. The remaining fighters holding there said that they were surrounded by ISIL. Elsewhere in the province, ISIL militants executed at least 21 Sunni tribal fighters on Friday after capturing them near al-Baghdadi town on Wednesday, local officials and tribesmen said on Saturday. Fighting continues on December 16. ISIL launched another attack on the Ramadi city center. Security forces armed with mortars and assault rifles repelled the attack with the help of Sunni tribes. Government forces also used adapted Humvees against ISIS in the attack. U.S. servicemen training Iraqi forces against ISIL were reportedly involved in a clash with ISIL forces near Ramadi on December 17, 2014. ISIL forces reportedly came near the base in an attempt to capture it, but this caused U.S. servicemen to open fire. With the support of an FA-18, ISIL was forced to withdraw. Progress was reportedly being made in the Al-Dolab area, 90 kilometers west of Ramadi. A hospital in Ramadi said that it received the bodies of many small children after they were killed by ISIL, while trying to escape from Al-Wafa. ISIL gunmen besieged a group of the Al-Bunaym tribe near Lake Thatha, and they were relying on plants growing near the lake to survive. On January 9, 2015, in support of ground units, 2 CF-188 Hornets successfully struck an ISIL transport truck carrying an armored personnel carrier near Ramadi. On January 21, Iraqi forces foiled an ISIS attack on Ramadi. Government forces, helped by tribesmen and coalition air support, repelled the attack on the city center. ISIS reportedly lost 48 fighters and 17 were arrested, and dozens of vehicles were also seized from ISIS. On January 26, Iraqi forces launched a major operation to retake areas of Ramadi not under government control. According to Faleh al-Izawai, deputy chief of the Anbar Council, said that the operation would focus on clearing the east-central areas. Iraqi government forces also announced a temporary curfew in the city to try to cleanse the city from ISIS fighters. On March 11, the Islamic State launched a major assault on Ramadi in Iraqi government-held areas. At 7 a.m. local time, ISIL launched the assault by sending suicide bombers to try to attack government forces. The car bombs killed 10 people, and wounded 30. But Iraqi government forces repelled the attack by shooting at the trucks before they could detonate their explosives. On April 5, RAF Tornado GR-4s provided air support to Iraqi military units near Ramadi which had come under fire from ISIL. A successful attack was conducted on the building using a paved-way IV laser-guided bomb. Iraqi army offensive. On April 8, Iraqi government forces began an offensive to capture the nearby Al-Khama district from ISIL. As a result, ISIL executed 300 people in the western Anbar province. It was also reported that 10,000 Sunni tribal fighters would participate in the Anbar offensive. On the same day, Iraqi government forces began an offensive in the Sijaria area east of Ramadi, in order to secure supply routes to the nearby Habriya air base, and to weaken the jihadists' grip on territory connecting Ramadi and Fallujah. It was reported that ISIL forces were retreating from Sijaria. On the 9th of April, coalition airstrikes killed 13 ISIL militants in western Ramadi. On the 12th of April, ISIL executed 35 al-Bofaj clan members in Ramadi. On the 30th of April, it was reported that the citizens in Ramadi were suffering a gas and oil shortage, after ISIL had captured the Ramadi gas plant to the east of Ramadi. Fall of Ramadi. On the 14th of May 2015, ISIL launched an assault on the city using armored bulldozers and the use of 10 suicide bombers to burst through the main gate, resulting in the capture of the police headquarters, government buildings and the Ramadi Great Mosque. On the 15th of May, an RAF Reaper among other coalition aircraft that came to the assistance of the Iraqi security forces, and it was able to destroy a terrorist position with a Hellfire missile. On the 16th of May, Iraqi officials claimed that ISIS militants withdrew from the main government building in the Iraqi city of Ramadi after airstrikes by the US-led coalition. Despite official claims, ISIS appeared to be still advancing, unhindered by US-led coalition airstrikes, and ultimately consolidated full control over the last government-controlled neighborhood of Malab, south of Ramadi. On the 17th of May, it was reported that Ramadi fell to the complete control of ISIL insurgents, with the Iraqi army and special forces employed, as well as Iraqi government officials filmed fleeing from the city escorted by tanks, with a total of 500 civilians and security personnel reported dead. According to a report by current and former American officials, ISIL fighters used a sandstorm to help seize a critical military advantage in the early hours of the terrorist group's attack on Ramadi. The sandstorm delayed American warplanes and kept them from launching airstrikes to help the Iraqi forces, helping to set in motion an assault that forced Iraqi security forces to flee. ISIL fighters used the time to carry out a series of car bombings followed by a wave of ground attacks in and around the city that eventually overwhelmed the Iraqi forces. Once the storm subsided, ISIL and Iraqi forces were intermingled in heavy combat in many areas, making it difficult for Allied pilots to distinguish between ISIL and pro-government fighters, the officials said. By that point, the militants had gained an operational momentum that could not be reversed. Further ISIL attempts to advance and criticism the Iraqi government appealed to the Shia militias for aid in recapturing the city. About 3,000 Shia militia amassed near the city by the 19th of May, and were on standby at the Habriya military camp 20 kilometers away from the city. ISIL prepared to defend Ramadi by setting up defensive positions and landmines. The pro-government forces thwarted an attack by ISIS overnight to the east of Ramadi where the Shia militiamen were stationed. The Iraqi cabinet also issued a call for volunteers to fight against ISIL and retake the city. On the 22nd of May, ISIL captured Husaybar, to the east of Ramadi. The following day, Iraqi government forces launched a counterattack, and reportedly recaptured the Hoceibas police station and retook the town from ISIL control. On the 24th of May, United States Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter criticized the Iraqi forces, saying that they showed no will to fight against ISIL during the battle and withdrew despite outnumbering them. His comments were dismissed as baseless by Hakeem al-Zamili, a senior Iraqi MP who blamed the failure of the battle on the U.S. military for not providing the Iraqi army with proper equipment, weapons and aerial support. Some U.S. intelligence and military officials said on the condition of anonymity that the U.S. had significant intelligence about the pending Islamic State offensive in Ramadi, but the U.S. did not order airstrikes against the ISIL convoys before the battle started. It left the fighting to Iraqi troops, who were ultimately forced to abandon their positions after being overwhelmed against the ISIL attack. The next day, a spokesman for Hyder al-Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, said that Carter had been given incorrect information following his criticism of its security forces over the fall of Ramadi. Saad al-Hadithi, a spokesman for al-Abadi, said his government was surprised by Carter's comments and the whole army should not be judged based on one incident. He also said that the Iraqi government believed the fall of Ramadi was due to mismanagement and poor planning by some senior military commanders in charge. General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the elite Quds force in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, blamed the fall of Ramadi on the U.S. military for its lack of will to fight against the ISIL and support the Iraqi troops against ISIL. On the same day, Iraqi government vowed to retake Ramadi within days. Joe Biden assured the Iraqi forces of full support against the ISIL. He also praised the Iraqi troops for fighting against the ISIL in Ramadi and elsewhere. On the 18th of June 2015, British Army's Brigadier Christopher explained the loss of Ramadi on the Anbar operations commander who ordered an unnecessary withdrawal from the city. Staff Major Gen. Mohammed Khalif al-Fadawi, who was the acting head of Anbar operations command as the commander had been injured, said he could not comment because he did not have permission to speak about the issue. On June 27, in a televised address, the Iraqi Prime Minister criticized his troops, saying they made an unauthorized withdrawal from the city and had they resisted instead of withdrawing, the city would not have been lost. On August 16, 2015, he ordered all of the commanders who abandoned their positions to face a court-martial.